Hello, this is Eric Bobrow, and in this ARCHICAD Quick Tip tutorial video, we'll use the Morph tool to easily solve 3 tricky problems sent in by members of my ARCHICAD Coaching Program, where I teach how to apply best practices methods in the context of real projects. Stan Cheshire of Portland, Oregon asked me how to create a wall with a sloped top that follows a stair profile with an intermediate landing at 3 feet above the risers and down to the ground. Jonathan Renshaw of Manchester, England asked how to create a wall finish with stucco and brick that had a toothed in and out design. Luis Barrios of Southern California asked for help creating an ADA pipe railing for stairs after wrestling with an ARCHICAD library part that didn't quite give him the options he needed. All 3 of these challenges can be easily addressed when you approach them using the right tools and best practices methods, which I'll show you in this ARCHICAD Quick Tip tutorial video. Let's get started. Take a look in the south elevation, and let's just figure out where the top should be. The simplest way to do that is to draw a polyline here, and when I get to this point here, instead of just stopping at that point, I'm going to lock the angle. I'll type in Option A, and that locks the angle. So that's a nice little trick for you. Whenever you're pointing at something and you've started a line, if you hold down the Option or the Alt key and type A, it'll lock in on that angle. So I can extend this down to the next point. Go down to this point here, and again to here. Now I'm going to again use the Option A and take it all the way down to the floor, because I'm not sure where he needs this to go. I'll just take it out a little bit further, and we'll take this and draw and extend this a little bit. So now I've got a line that follows the tops of the stair treads, and I'm going to drag it up 3 feet. So now it's 3 feet above the stair treads, meeting ADA requirements. Now, we could use an element that was exactly this shape to cut the top of the wall, but I'm going to actually create something that's a cap for the wall, so it's going to have some thickness. So how do I do that? Well, I will create a copy of it. I'm going to copy it and paste in a new polyline, and then drag this down, and let's just say 1 inch. All right, so now we have something that is the shape of the wall cap, except you might have already noticed this, that it's 1 inch vertically, but it's not 1 inch going across here. So let's use a different trick. I've created a second piece of polyline. I'll move it back into position by hitting undo, and then instead of dragging it, I'm going to use the offset command here. And when I offset, it's going to be whatever distance I choose, but evenly offset in all dimensions. So now if I type in 1 inch, you can see that it's 1 inch vertically, and it's also 1 inch going perpendicular to this slope. We'll go and just close off the ends here by using the extend the polyline here, and do the same thing at the other end. So now we've got a closed boundary, and I'll use the Morph tool to create a 3D geometry, because right now we don't see any, there would be nothing to see in 3D. This is just purely 2D line work. So I'll hold down the magic wand key, which is the space bar on the keyboard, and when the magic wand comes up and click, you can see that now when I shift click, we've got a morph selected here. Now when I go to 3D at first, it's a little odd because the stair is over here and the morph, even though it looked like it was in line, is way off to the side. The reason for that is that the morph was drawn in line with the elevation. Remember, I was looking in an elevation view at the stair, and the morph was drawn right exactly in the line of reference for the elevation. I'm going to drag this down to be right even with the stair. And now if I go to 3D, we'll see something a little bit more what you might have expected. Let's draw a wall here, So I'll go to the wall tool and we'll just snap to this morph. There. Wall had a little reference line there. I'm just going to drag it so that it's sort of right next to the stair, and we'll go to 3D, and we can see that now this morph is right along the face of the wall, but the wall isn't quite tall enough, so we'll just go and tell it to extend up, and I'll snap this to the top here, although I could take it up higher because the top of it's going to be trimmed off. Now, how do we trim the top of the wall? Well, we can trim the top of a wall with a roof, or using the solid element operations, we can trim it with any solid element. Now, this morph right now is a face. It's not solid. It's purely 2D. So how do we make it have some dimension and be solid? Well, I go to the face of it where we get this funny little diamond shape symbol. Press down. And now I can extend or push or pull this however much we want. This is using the option here for push and pull. And I'll just snap it to the back face of the wall. So you can see that now it's exactly as thick as the wall. I could make it further. I could make it stick out a little bit on one side or both sides if I wanted. Now, how am I going to trim it off? I'll go to the design menu, solid element operations, select the wall, make it the target. Select this morph, make it the operator. Subtraction with upward extrusion will subtract where they touch each other and everything above. Execute, and we now have a beautiful shape in terms of the wall just exactly trimmed off where it should be. We go to the south elevation, and you can see that it's exactly in line with that polyline. So there's still the morph there, and if we went to the line tool, a polyline tool, I think we can even say, yeah, there's, well, if we turn that layer on, if we, the no plot here, if we turn that on, I think that, yeah, there's the polyline. So there's the polyline that was there, and of course the morph is in the exact right place. So that concludes the first demonstration of using the morph tool as a way to trim the top of a wall in line with where it needs to be for the stairs. Let's go to the second question for tonight's video tutorial, and that is something that I've created here. This is a small little building intended to be similar in basic context to what Jonathan Renshaw asked, where we have brick around these windows, and we're going to cut out a recess to put the stucco detail. So how do we do that? So let's go to that south elevation here, and we'll go to the fill tool. So instead of using the polyline tool, we're going to use the fill tool because I'd like to actually cover this up. I'd like to make it look like there's stucco here. So I'm not going to be overly precise, but I think we can easily go and create this as a graphic with maybe a 25% fill so we can see this, and approximately get it to be the 3 bricks in height that I saw he had, like that. And then we'll go and draw another one like this, and we'll select these 2 elements, and let's multiply them, say 4 times, like that. So you can see that we now have this combination of shapes here. I didn't quite get it the right size of the brick, but close enough for our purposes here. If I select this and copy it and paste in another one, and now I have 2 of these, and I'm going to make this one be empty so that now we can see when I start to make this all one piece what's happening. So I'm going to go to the option that says I want to add to the outline and trace this. So you can see now this is one shape. I can also go here and using that same option, magic wand, in here. Click, magic wand. Click, magic wand. So each time that I click, it remembers the last thing I did, then magic wand. So I can very quickly create that shape. Now this is a single piece, and these guys here are separate, so I'm just going to delete them. We don't need them anymore. And I'll drag this back on top. All right, now that's sort of looking like what Jonathan had in his view here, right? But it's not going to show up in 3D. If I go to 3D, there's nothing there. So how do I create that stucco? Well, if I go to the floor plan, I'm going to go and drag this elevation marker right on top of, or actually in line with, the face of the wall. Why am I doing that? Well, you recall when I created the morph in that elevation view, it placed it directly along the line of the elevation. So if I temporarily move the elevation there or create another marker for that, then we're going to be able to create the morph directly in line with the face of the wall. So let's go to the morph tool, magic wand here. We now have a morph instantly traced there. Maybe we'll go and create, actually, before we do that, let me just undo that. We'll take this fill here. It's good if you get the fill the way you want before you trace it with the morph, because it's much easier to work with fills than it is to work with morphs. With the fill tool, if I go to the fill and say that I want to add here, say something like this, and then of course we could have some more shapes here. So I could make this whole shape even, as complex as I wanted, but it's much easier if I have this before I turn it into morph, because once I trace it with the morph tool, it's much harder to edit the shape of the morph. You can do it, but it's just not going to be nearly as easy as with the fill tool. Now let's go look in 3D and we'll see, we see something there. It's right on the face of the wall, but it's not really cutting out from the wall, is it? Because it's exactly on the same plane. ARCHICAD isn't quite sure which to show in front and which behind. Now if I take this morph and I use that push-pull option and take it out even like ½ an inch, it's going to be very clearly in front of the brick. So now we're getting something, relatively close to what Jonathan had. Except if we look at this closely, you'll see that it's inset a little bit. So how would we make that effect? If we were to inset it in ARCHICAD, this particular shape, it would get buried. So instead of insetting this, I'm going to actually create two versions of it. One to cut out the hole and one to be the stucco. So here's how we do it. I'll select the morph and this wall and use an option not too many people realize is available, where you say I only want to show what's selected in 3D. So in 3D I can switch and say temporarily show only part of the model. Now having done that, I can go to the back here and take this face here. So even though this was buried in the wall, I can still hover over that face and pull it. And instead of pulling it all the way back, I'll just pull it back till it's just as thick as the brick. So I've actually just made it as deep as the brick. And then we'll go to the solid element operations by going to the design menu, solid element operations, and make the wall the target, make this morph the operator, and subtract. So now what that means is that the wall is going to be cut out along here. The next step can be a little confusing, so you might need to watch this video more than once. I'm going to go and select that morph and copy it. then this copy that's cutting out the hole, I'm going to put it on a layer called No Plot Solid Element Operators. It's just another layer that I'm going to actually hide. So now you can see that the morph is disappeared. And if I paste in the original location, I'll have another morph, which is the exact same shape, of course, because it's a copy. But this morph here, when I go to 3D, I can go and select the morph that's on this other layer and inset it, say 1 inch. So I'm just using the push-pull, and you can see what it's done is this morph that is visible is 1/2 inch in. The other morph that was cutting out the hole is on a hidden layer and is removing the space around the brick. So we now have something that looks pretty close to what Jonathan asked for, and I think he'll be pretty happy with that. Okay, let's take a look at the third question sent in by Luis Barrios. He wanted to create a railing that followed this shape here rather than what could be created using the ADA handrail object. The ADA handrail object does have some various settings, but there was no way that he was able to get it exactly the way he wanted. So in the coaching call, I tried to turn this into a morph and then see if I could move pieces of it around, and it seemed like it was going to be pretty awkward, and then it occurred to me there's a much simpler solution, which is what we're going to work with here. So if I go to the south elevation here, I'm going to take this line work as a guide for creating a new railing simply out of tubes created with a complex profile. To do that, I need to fill out his lines with some lines that indicate the shape of the railing going around. So I'm going to go from this point here to here, make sure that it stays tangent, go down with a straight line to here. Let's see, get it in there, tangent, and then take this. And actually, let's go back a couple of steps because I think I missed that point. I need to zoom in a little bit. Go a straight line here to there, and then tangent, and to this point. Yeah, that's looking better. And then a straight segment to finish this up. All right, so this is now a polyline that goes around the outside. I'll take this line and this line and this line as my guides. This is going to be the top of the two railings, and this is going to be the outside. So just remember that. Whoops, when I copy these, and let's see, do I have this selected? Yeah, okay, I have copy this and go back to the floor plan and paste. Here, and we'll just drag this over to the side. All right. Now, in order to create the tubing, I'm going to go to the Complex Profiles Profile Manager. Now, it's under the Options menu in ARCHICAD 20. You may find it in another place if you're in a different version of ARCHICAD, maybe under the Design menu here. We want to go to Profile Manager, and we'll create a custom profile by using this option to create a new profile, and we'll call this ADA Handrail 1. And in this profile, which I'll zoom out a little bit to be able to see the origin point, I want to draw a circle because this is going to be a tubular profile, and it's going to have a diameter of 1.5 inches, which means it's 3/4 of an inch radius. Now this circle here is just a 2D graphic. In order to make it into a complex profile, I need to use the fill tool, and I can make it out of whatever I want, stainless steel or steel, and then magic wand to create this. So this is now a fill that's made out of a particular material or building material. And I'll store this profile here so you can see the shape that it's got. Now when I go back to the floor plan, I'll zoom in here and I'll use the wall tool and say that the wall tool, I want to be a complex profile using the ADA handrail that I just created. Use the magic wand with the space bar, magic wand click each one of these, and you can see it's created a beautiful shape out of this. We'll select these elements and say show me just those elements in 3D. And you can see lying down on the ground, because after all it was on the floor plan that I traced those lines. They're lying on the ground, but they look pretty darn close to what we wanted. Now there is something that you may have noticed or may not have, and that is that this red line is now being treated as the axis line rather than the outside boundary. So let me go and edit the profile and take this fill and move it over so that the origin point is on the right side. And this is optional, but I like to keep that original circle in the same place. We'll store it. And what that means is that this line will be one side of the wall. And when I go back to the floor plan, you can see how it updates. And so now these elements here are going right inside that. Now these two are above their respective lines and they need to be flipped. So we'll just click this flip option. Now in other versions of ARCHICAD it may look slightly different, but you're going to flip it from left to right or right to left to be able to do that. So now if we look here in 3D, we'll see it looks much the same, but it's now fitting within the boundaries that were our intended design constraints. All right, so now I have two things that I want to do. I want to flip it up, and I want to clean up some of these extra funny little join lines there. To do that, first of all, I'm going to select all of these elements, which are walls here, and I'm going to convert them into a morph. I'm going to convert this selection to morphs. And you can see when I do that, it looks a little bit different in terms of the handles, but still the geometry's there. Here's a morph. Here's a morph. These are all separate little morph pieces. In order to do the next step, I will select all of those morph pieces, or if I hadn't deselected them, I could have continued. The next step is to go to the design menu, modify morph, and choose union. This combines them into a single morph. So now when I select it, you can see a single selection selects all of them. Having done that, I can go clean up. Here. I can go clean up these lines. Now, in order to do that, I need to switch my arrow tool to select pieces of morph. So with nothing selected, go to the arrow tool and switch to this hollow arrow. And then I can select, for example, lines like this and go into the morph tool and say I'd like to make the edges soft. Now I can also just draw a selection rectangle around this to select all of these ones and make them all soft here. So we can do that down here. I don't want to do it at the other ends because these should be potentially hard. I want to just select the ones in this area and make them soft. Now having done that, I'm going to switch back the arrow tool to the normal solid arrow so that I can select the morph as a whole and affect the whole thing as a unit. I want to rotate this up, and while we can do it sort of freely in 3D space, it helps to have something to line up our actions. So I'm going to go to the slab tool. This is one of my favorite things, is just to create a little geometric guide. So this slab, when I go to 3D with the slab and this morph and say just show me those two things, you can see how this is resting right along that edge. And I can select it and use the option to rotate. So we can drag the morph or we can rotate it using this option here. And then when I move the compass or the pencil over to the edge, I can lock in relationship to this edge and say I'd like to take it from the x-axis up to this axis, which currently is being called y, although we might think of it as z or z. And you can see it's now rotated perfectly around. So let's go to show everything in 3D. And we can just select this and drag it into position. Now, I'm going to fine-tune this a little bit, but you can see that it's already looking pretty similar, but with the new geometry that we need. Let's go and take a look in that south elevation here, and turn on that layer for the line work, and select this, and we'll just grab that morph and put it right on top there. And you can see how this morph is exactly on top of the lines that Lewis had drawn. If we go to 3D, we'll see the shape that it's got. And we could, for example, we could get rid of the handrail, this handrail here, and see what it's got. So if I had included the other parts there, I could have created one morph that it had all of that. So that probably would be a better way to go. But if we go back to that south elevation, we'll see what we've got. So this is the morph element, and this is the other handrail that's behind it. Pretty easy to do when you approach it with the right tools and methods. So if you'd like to get my help with your ARCHICAD challenges, I invite you to consider joining my ARCHICAD Coaching Program. You'll find information about the coaching program on the page below this video. This has been Eric Bobrow. Thanks for watching.